All right,
Great.
get away.
So Norman.
So thank you everybody for coming. My name is Norm Ravsky, and I'm a past president of Federation, and I had the great honor of doing two things in the past several years. One was to be the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee, and the other now is being the chair of this committee to do grants for the Federation in a new effort to get new innovative ideas where people can help with new things or think of new ways to engage the population, the Jewish population in New Haven. The strategic plan, actually, the committee started about 2.5 years ago, just before the pandemic. We got a little bit sidetracked because of the pandemic, because part of the strategic planning was to engage people in multiple different ways. We wanted to do parlor meetings, but unfortunately we weren't able to do too many of those. But we had personal interviews, albeit sometimes by Zoom, and we had meetings like this to engage people, and we also had a community-wide survey to try to find out what the priorities were of our community. And we had great return. We had over 1,000 responses to our survey. And what we came up with was, what came out of that was a strategic plan that showed that the community wanted more experiential engagement with for education. They wanted more engagement of the Federation and what we do for the elderly and for those people who are in need. And those were the three main. Am I missing anything, Judy? Was there one other goal?
Security.
And security. And part of the strategic plan was also that we should put aside money from planning and allocations, from the monies that we raise in a year, for impact grants. And that's where this committee came, how it came about. So the committee met, and we came up with the idea of what do we want to do to make impact grants. And I think all of you have read the explanation of what the impact grants, or what we're looking for in impact grants. And basically it is to come up with new ways of engaging our community with the ideas of A, Federation, and B, what our strategic plan was. And so we figured on, I think it said that around $25,000 was the upper amount of an impact grant. It could be less. 2 organizations or 2 people, or if we find people who are having like ideas, can come together and maybe double the amount that they need, or with economy of scale, maybe two different groups can come together and need less money to do even better things together. So that's what this informational meeting is for, is A, to know who's applying and what questions they have, and maybe if ideas are exchanged, maybe we can have people collaborate. I think collaboration is something that we've always looked for whenever we have multiple people and multiple organizations working towards something. I have to say that the Planning and Allocations Committee has been looking to start impact grants for a while. David Haas, who's on the call with us, when he was chair of Planning and Allocation, always said, how can we do this? How can we do this? And thankfully, the board of Federation because of the strategic plan, came to the realization that impact grants may help. And one of the things that impact grants helps us to do is know that our money is going where it needs to go in our community, and that it's doing the things that we need done. So with that, Robin?
Yes, thank you, Norman. I'm going to turn it over now to David Haas and Dina Schulman to review the grant process. Whoops, did I share that right? Talk about and answer any questions. I'm sorry, I got distracted here. I wanted to share my screen. David and Dina, I'm going to let you kind of take it away.
Great. Thanks a lot, Robin. Nice to see everybody tonight. And it's great to see Dina. I haven't seen Dina in person in a long time, but it's great to see you on Zoom.
You too.
And Norm, thanks for that shout out. I had the privilege of chairing PNA for a number of years. And I think we always talked about how we really weren't doing a lot of planning and allocations. We were doing much more allocating than we were planning. So this really was an opportunity to sort of pivot a little bit, and at least pivot slightly so that we can start planning more and listening to our organizations in the community and seeing what they need and how they feel they could best serve in new ways. So Robin, can you potentially share your screen that shows the website?
Yeah, can you see that? I'm doing screen share.
While we wait for that, Dina, did you want to add?
Uh-oh, now I don't. It showed me exactly what to do.
Dina, did you want to add anything?
Sure. So I think maybe, oh, it's coming on, Robin. So that's great. I think that a way that this might work well is for David to sort of take us through the application itself. And then I can help people a little bit with trying to interpret what each of these questions means and how to, apply great grantsmanship so that you'll be able to create a really impactful and concise grant proposal.
Great. Thanks, Dina. And I definitely think Dina is an expert, obviously, because she does this for a living in addition to her research. So we've had the benefit of having her expertise in designing this. And I should say that when Norm asked us to serve on this committee, one of our primary foci was to make sure this was as painless as possible for organizations, because as many of us who have applied for grants before know, they're quite tedious and laborious. And so we've really been cognizant of that because we know how valuable everyone's time is and how limited their time is. And we want to make sure that this is a resource that's available without a tremendous amount of laborious, tedious paperwork filling out, which is the whole purpose of this online platform. And the questions that have been posed with very careful attention to trying to make sure that we're meeting our goals. So the other aspect of this is it gives people that are in organizations that don't historically apply for PNA money opportunities to share ideas and be collaborative, such as, let's say, synagogues or smaller organizations or organizations that haven't historically, or even individuals that want to have a sponsoring organization and they have a great idea that they could have a sponsoring organization that they can apply with to obtain grant money. And the goals of the funding process are listed here. And first and foremost are to unite, of course, the Jewish community and recognizing how diverse we are. And really, the focus should be trying to develop relationships and develop projects that are going to allow for economies of scale and sharing not only of ideas, but of resources. We also want to make sure that the experiences that are created through grants that are funded, those are experiences that are going to enhance Jewish learning, and they could potentially be impactful for all different types of demographics within our Jewish community. As mentioned, building bridges and relationships, to me, that's kind of the most important thing in life is relationships, whether they're business relationships or professional relationships or personal relationships. And this is an opportunity for us to continue to do that. And then we're all too familiar with when we come together in time of crisis, but we want to make sure that the grants that are granted here, that they serve as a reflection of all of us in the Jewish community. So we can, of course, be proud of the endeavors, but that they are speaking a collective voice. And then there's the greater New Haven community, trying to engage those members that may not be affiliated with synagogues or organizations that are represented on this call. How do we engage those Jews and maybe other members of the community that might not be Jewish that could learn more about the Jewish community through some of the projects that could be created? Do you want to scroll down a little bit? So this is the time.
Can I add something there, David?
Of course, yeah.
Before you continue. So one of the things that's really important is that you want to make very clear how your project relates to one of these goals. You might even say our project directly aligns with bullet point 3, building bridges, and bullet point 5, this one, and here are the ways. And this highlighting of the partnerships is just so important, as David said and as Norman said, that we love to see this. We love to see it for efficiency. We love to see it for relationship building. This is one of the wonderful, it's not a side benefit of the grant, but in other words, you're doing a project and you're creating these partnerships. And so you really want to be able to highlight why you're choosing the partners you're choosing, why this is a good match, why is it a good match right now? And again, how does this sort of raise all boats involved?
Thanks, Tina. So obviously the timeline is such that we're already in the middle of this timeline. Today is January 20th, hence we're having the informational meeting. And you can see that the timeline is rather quick. And again, as we go through the application, it's not too laborious. So it should be something that you're able to fill out in a relatively timely manner. February 10th is when the grant proposal submission period will close. And then the committee will review and confirm applications. And we plan to notify everybody by February 21st, hopefully, if they've been awarded a grant. And we were very careful at, again, not just with the grant application process, but we took some time to discuss whenever you apply for and you're awarded a grant in various different venues, you have to provide progress reports. And we didn't want that process to be too labor intensive, but we do want to make sure that people are held accountable for the dollars that they receive and make sure that they're utilizing those funds in a way that they stated that they were going to use them, and provide updates to the committee and federation. So there'll be initially just a check-in with a task force member from the grant proposal committee, where it's just a conversation over the phone, and that would happen in May, so roughly 3 months after. And that could be a conversation just detailing that this is what we've done, this is what we're planning to do, here's the report verbally of our thought process and our goals. But then we would request that by August, when there's 6 months worth of time elapsed, that there be a report, and we'll sort of give some framework as the time comes near as to what we're looking for. But the framework should be describing how you've initiated the process, how it's going, what you anticipate the impact to be, and how many touch points there will be in the community, and what kind of response you've received. In October and November, we can then have another verbal check-in. And then lastly, in January of next year, which would be roughly a year from when the grant is allocated, we would expect for a final report.
Can I jump in now again,
Of course,
David?
yes.
Thanks. So one of the things is these check-in points are not meant to be laborious to you. They're actually a great opportunity for you to step back and assess where you are and to make sure that you're on track to keep going. And even that final report can be the basis of the next step, whether you're applying for another grant or expanding the program, whatever it's going to be, that you'll have a concise summary of what you've accomplished and how, and what bumps there were along the way, and what you need to address, and what worked really well. So this is great documentation for you, and it's great for you to make sure that you're on track. And it would even be not a bad idea to include these report times on your project timeline, which David will talk about in just a few minutes.
And if I could just piggyback on that, I would say that it's also an opportunity to take advantage of resources that might be available at Federation. When you're checking in, you could say, hey, we're struggling a little bit with this. Is there something else that we should be thinking about? Is there something we're not thinking about so that we can maximize success? I think as you go through the process, even with the best laid plans, sometimes you run into roadblocks or unexpected sort of hiccups, and we're here to support that. And we want to see this be successful. So admitting any vulnerability and knowing when you need to pivot and allowing us to be a resource for you, I think that will be really, really helpful for all of us to learn and make sure that there's maximal impact from the project. So in terms of the criteria, so obviously just demographic information, and it must be relevant to the long-term goals of strengthening the Greater New Haven, Israel, or other Jewish communities around the world. Must demonstrate a need within our Jewish community and exhibit that it's well planned and feasible. And the grant applicant, whether it be an organization or an individual that's going to be sponsored by an organization, must address the long-term plan to carry out the proposal, as well as a financial projection that includes how there will be sustainability after this impact grant is put forth for this program to potentially continue independent from funding theoretically, although, that's something that remains to be seen as to whether or not there's other resources. But the goal here is not for these projects to apply year after year after year, but rather
not completed.
But rather to develop a process by which the project will be self-sustaining. And then, of course, justify an appropriate budget in relation to the proposed project. So I'm going to let Dina go through these questions because she was really instrumental in designing them.
So let me just start by saying of the part that you just summarized, David. The important piece here is that all of the components of your proposal are in alignment. So in other words, your project idea is in line with the mission of this grants program, that your plan is in alignment with what that goal is, that your timeline and your budget are in alignment with what you're saying you're going to do. When there's consistency across all of those pieces, it makes for a really strong proposal. So that's a good overview to start, and we can go down into this more nitty gritty. So for the goal of the request, this is really, what's your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish here? I would be really clear about what you're doing. So one of the things that people sometimes get tripped up about in a purpose is sort of like the overall goal versus the very specific goal. So you could list both of those things, but I just want to make clear that you should be very clear about what exactly you want to do. So you can say, we want to enhance Jewish life in Greater New Haven. That's great. But what's the specific goal? How are you actually going to do that? So you want to make sure that that language is very, very clear about what the goal of your request is. With this next question of why do you anticipate that you'll be successful in this endeavor? Really, this question is about why you, why this project, and why now? Those are the three pieces that I think would be helpful to address in this. So it's not just, hey, we're great. We've been around for a while. We've got our pulse, finger on the pulse of the community in this way. We've noticed, this issue, and, we're the premier people in the community, or us and our partner, are the premier, folks in the community who have knowledge about this issue, or who can put together a program or whatever it is. But again, it's why you, why this project, and why now? So for the actual project, so what's the problem or the opportunity that you're trying to address? So really, through this whole proposal, you want to tell a story. And you want to tell the story of, here, we've noticed this issue. Here's why this issue is important. And here's how we're going to address it. And so this is the first piece of that story. What's the problem or the opportunity that you've noticed that you want to address or build upon, or whatever it is? And give us a little background information. We know a lot of things, but we don't know everything, or we think we know things, but we're wrong. So it's really helpful because you know about this. You're the expert on this. I'm assuming that's why you're applying for these grants. So we want to know what you know. So that we can make a good decision about funding for this. So give us that historical context, give us the statistics, any data that you have that helps us to see what the issue is. So if you say something like, well, gee, we had this early iteration of a program, there used to be 50 people attending, now there 15 people attending. We still think this program is important. Here's how we think that we can improve this program. Our goal is to get us back to not 50 people attendance, but even 75 people in attendance. and here's how we're going to do it. You'll discuss going forward. The other thing to stress is why this is important and how it will enhance our Greater New Haven Jewish community. So putting your project into that context, I think should be fairly clear, but just make sure that you add that piece in about how it would impact the community. So describing your project is literally like, what do you plan to do? So the problem is the problem. The next question, this question is describing how you're going to address it. So tell us about a program you're putting into place. Tell us about, a new partnership that you have that's going to improve an outcome in some way. And give us the nitty gritty of it. We need the timeline for completion. We need to know who the players are. So this is where you would put in the full description of what you're planning to do. The next question could even be part of the previous question, but it's important enough that we separated it out. The question is are there existing programs or things that are similar? And if there are, how are you improving upon them? So in other words, we don't want duplication of things that are already out there. We want new and innovative ideas. It's fine to build upon an existing program, like in the example that I just gave. But what's the innovation in this? Like, why would people get excited about this? So make clear how, if there's something that's similar to what you're thinking, of how your project is different and how you're going to, again, have that innovation in what's already out there. Describing what you would like, your hopes and aspirations for the impact of the project. And again, this has to do with your time frame also. So if your project is 3 years, what do you see happening over that time period? If you're proposing a 1 or a 2 year proposal, you want to certainly talk about that time frame. But this is really, what's the outcome that you're looking for? Are you looking for increased attendance, at a program? Are you looking for, a greater catchment of people for something or other? And so how are you going, what is the outcome and how are you going to evaluate if you've reached that outcome? So I'm going to go back to this very simple example. It needs to be something concrete, not just to say, we want to see increased enrollment. How much increased enrollment? We want 10% more. We want to go again from 20 people to 75 people. So there needs to be some way to evaluate if you have reached your goals. And again, in a concrete way, you can say something like, we'll do a satisfaction survey if that makes sense for you, but there needs to be some way that we can see if the needle is going to be moved, and what your hope is for how much you want that needle to be moved. The self-sustaining piece of this grant is really important. So if you're planning to run have a project or start some new initiative, and the plan is for it to continue. So if you want say a certain holiday program or something, and you want it every single year for that holiday, you expect this program to be running. How is getting this grant going to put you on a path to be able to be sure that you're going to be able to run that holiday programming every single year? So that might mean that you're going to reach out for partnership. That might mean that you're going to be asking participants to assist with funding. There needs to be some plan built in for how this program or project or whatever it is going to be sustainable over time. So obviously, if you have a multi-year funding request, it's our last item here, you're going to need to spend a little bit more time. So I would encourage you to be really specific about what's happening in year 1, what's happening in year 2, and what's happening in year 3. And if some things are duplicative, you can just say, we will use the same procedures as in year 1. But we will be evaluating at the end of year 1, and there might be a change to some procedures. We anticipate they might be XYZ. That's totally fine, but it's not okay to lay out a plan for year 1 and then not mention anything for years 2 and 3. So for each year, you might want to make like a little section of what's happening in each of those years. And one thing I will say is to be really clear that if your goal for your year one has to be something such that you and we will have confidence that you're going to make it to year two. So in other words, if there's something that can just totally tank in year one, and there's no way if year one doesn't work that year 2 and 3 will not be feasible, you have to rethink that plan for year one. So that's really important to say here, this is why we have this question of why do you think you're going to be successful? So for a multi-year grant, you can say, here's why we think year one is going to work. And that's why we have high confidence that we'll be able to move on to years 2 and 3. David, do you want to do the budgeting piece just so that everyone's not listening to me? And then I have a few just like general grant writing tips that I can share if people are interested.
Sure. It's a pleasure to listen to you. Don't be ridiculous. So, so I would say this is really easy in terms of budgeting. You certainly want to make sure that you have dollars allocated for programming and marketing and fundraising and the things that are listed here, of course. And if there's something that we haven't thought of, specifically listed there. I don't know off the top of my head whether the fields that are available, because we actually did receive a grant request already, and that person stated that they wanted to include additional space where the fields were maxed out for what they wanted to actually state. But if you really want to delineate for us so that we can understand exactly how the dollars are going to be utilized, that would be really helpful, even if it requires a separate document on Excel or Word or what have you. But you can see these are really just general categories that we thought of that could really encompass all of the potential expenses that you would need. And there might be an opportunity to use some of the dollars that would be allocated if there's in-house resources at a certain organization or you have access. You might want to mention that, because the dollars we would like to see go as far as possible and be as impactful and far-reaching. So again, delineating with as much detail as possible to help make it as easy to understand how the dollars are going to be utilized would be helpful. And then if you scroll down a little bit, Robin, then any funding sources that you may already have and that you're potentially applying for in addition to the grant specifically that this is detailing. So there may be alternative sources from either individual donors or foundation grants that you've procured, or other things that might be revenue generating that you're anticipating. There might be a project that could have, let's say it's a publication of sorts, and there could be advertising revenue that's generated by this publication that might be something that could unite the Jewish community. That could be something from an estimated income perspective. And then lastly, someone, as you scroll down, lastly, just a signature so we know who the contact person is, and we know that you understand the terms and everything that's been stated above. So I don't think it will take a long time to think through the process, but in terms of the physical filling out of this form, I don't think it will take very long. And again, thank you to Dina and the committee for recognizing that we want to make sure that we maximize the people on this call and those that are potentially applying's time, because we recognize how valuable it is.
So I'll just state like a few basic grant writing tips. So first of all, we all learned in kindergarten to follow the directions. And I know that seems really trite, but I guess the thing is to answer the question that's asked in a really concise way. So sometimes I find when I'm reviewing people's grants that there's a question that we asked and they give us a response to a different question. So the questions here are designed to be really simple and straightforward. And so just make sure that you respond to the question that's asked so that we can have the information that we need. I know that seems really like overly basic, but it's just, I think people get nervous when they're writing grants sometimes and they start putting all kinds of different responses down, and there's no trickery here. Like the question is what the question is, and just, you can answer the question simply. Another thing is review your application for typos and for there being a logical flow. And I know this also seems, whatever. I will say my students all the time, they're like, well, why does the grammar matter? Why do you know what I mean? But the point is that this is your first impression that you're giving, and we want to make sure that you're going to manage these grant funds well. And so when we see an application that just doesn't look like there's been a lot of thought put into it, it makes it a little difficult to feel confident that a grantee would be a good steward of the funds. So it sounds silly, but look over your application, make sure that it's something that is understandable and makes sense. And one way that you can easily do that is to show your proposal to somebody who is not directly involved with your proposed project, and ask them, does this make sense to you? If they can really get, I see what your purpose is, I see why you think it should be you with this project, and now, yes, your timeline seems like that's an appropriate timeline for what you're proposing. Yes, your budget seems in line with what you're proposing. So they'll catch things that you might not necessarily catch because we get so entrenched in what we're doing and we just don't see these things. So this person will help you with all of the above things with, yes, you answered the question. No, I don't see any typos. And yes, this application actually makes sense to me. I understand what you're proposing and it's a really awesome idea. And so you can feel confident that the great likelihood is that then the committee members will understand it as well.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I think we can open the floor for questions. There were some questions in the chat. For those of you that weren't looking at the chat, specifically, the timeline implies a year-long program. Is that what we're looking for? And Judy's responded to each of these already, but for those that didn't read it, the grant cycle is 12 months, but it doesn't mean it has to be ongoing for the entire time. Brian asked whether an organization can submit more than one grant proposal, each involving a partnership with another organization or institution. And we've really been very, very open to any grant proposal and not set any limitations, as Judy's detailed in the chat. And we'll review everything that comes in that's appropriately filled out because we want to hear new, fresh ideas.
Great. Really, this is an opportunity now. If anybody has questions, the committee's happy to respond.
Yep. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I saw on one of the later pages you showed having to do with Israel, but that was not listed as one of the priority areas in the beginning. The three, I don't remember what you called them, the three main goals or the 5 strategic areas. Israel wasn't mentioned. So I'm just curious thoughts about that.
So Jewish education is one of the key pillars, and Israel is at the heart of who we are as a Jewish community and who we are as a Jewish Federation. And so Israel tends to always come into play one way or another. And I think it depends, you know, how you might think about it in terms of a creative program or opportunity to bring people together.
Okay, so that's a yes for Israel. So that's coming under, you're considering that part of Jewish education. Some people would not. I'm happy the New Haven Jewish Federation thinks that way, but just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd say the Jewish Federation proudly thinks that way. In fact, let me make the shameless plug for our upcoming big mission to Israel with the Heart for Jewish Community, March 9th to 16th, 2023, and you should all be there because it's going to be spectacular. Other questions?
I have a question. What is the grant award that we're hoping to achieve? Is it 25,000? Is that the amount, or is it up to that amount that we can ask for?
Right. So I actually wanted to make mention of something. So let me answer your question in a slightly longer-winded way. I apologize, but this is our first year of doing impact grants, and so the Jewish Federation Board determined that 10% of the allocable pot was going to be set aside for this purpose, with the goal, assuming that we are wonderfully successful this year, that each year following we continue to increase the pot. So this year we have around $100,000 to allocate for this purpose, and the grants are going to be awarded up to $25,000. So they could be much smaller than that and still very impactful. And depending upon, we have no idea right now, and what you're all going to be submitting and how it all fits together. We don't know what the puzzle looks like yet. But yeah, so the maximum grant amount could be 25,000, but it could be less, and that could also be wonderful.
One of the reasons that we put we wanted to put that into context is because on planning and allocations, and for those of you who are here from some of the agencies that submit to planning and allocation, sometimes people will submit very, very high numbers, knowing that they've never gotten that amount of money, and knowing that they're not going to get that amount of money. We want you to know what we can afford in this impact grant cycle, so that you can specifically look at a program and say, I can do it with this much money, plus if I'm going to raise from other sources, if I have money from other sources, that this can get off the ground. Not ask for $100,000 and we can say, well, we can only give you 25,000, and you say, I can't do the grant at all. That's a waste of time for everybody. So we just wanted to give you realistic expectations as to what we can do.
Mhm.
The other thing is at the beginning, I said, we spoke about collaboration. So one of the things, and I just texted Judy, is when we get these grant proposals and we look at them, we might say, hey, the BBYO grant proposal really melds well with the Camp Laurelwood proposal or the JFS proposal, and let's get these two people together and maybe we can make a better grant with two organizations, and we can and it'll give a wider demographic and more people to be exposed to it. And so we may come back to you and say, listen, can the two of you really talk in a timely manner so that maybe we can give you one larger grant to both do this project together, because they're virtually identical projects.
I'm always a fan of asking when we do present something, if there's something we haven't thought of, because I always think it's really important to know what we're not thinking of. So for those of you that are reviewed the grant proposals or the grant process and have heard what we've had to say, are there things that you think we've overlooked?
This committee did an awesome job.
Well,
One of the
It's got to be something.
go ahead.
It would be great. Maybe it would be easier after people have completed the applications. We would really love your feedback on were any of the questions worded in a confusing way, or, did you, again, we're trying to make this as easy as possible, but did you find it hard to complete the application in the time, before the deadline? So any feedback that you have about the process will certainly help us to refine procedures for next year.
Right. And if you know anybody who you think might benefit from the grant process but hasn't been on this call, please let them know about it. I've been in this community, and I've been in Federation for decades, and sometimes people say, here are these people in Federation and they think that they know everything. We know we don't know everything. And one of the exciting aspects of this grant project is that we want to reach out to hear the ideas, to hear all of your ideas, because you may have better ideas than we do. We don't have all the ideas. And if your ideas can be impactful and help this Jewish community grow, kol hakavod, please let us help you do that. That's what this is about, letting us help you do that.
Wow, I almost don't want to say anything. That was like a mic drop moment, Norm. Excellent. But I am really excited to see all of you. I mean, some of you, we know well through the regular planning and allocations process. You're historically involved in that as an agency, but others of you are synagogues or other groups, and we are just so excited to harness the capacity of our community to think big and to be creative and to build the future. So look, I'm accessible whenever you need me. Robin is here for you. The committee is here for you. Everybody just cares so much and wants us to be an even better Jewish community. So thank you all for thinking about it. We're pushing you a little out of your comfort zone. You know that, and we're excited for what's gonna come from it. Karen.
One other thing, I'm always the question lady, or the one with the mouth. I'm not sure which, or both. Does it say on the website? I did not know about the website before, so I've pulled that up now and I haven't looked at it thoroughly yet. Does it have a link to someone to ask questions should that arise in the process?
Our emails are on there, but you all can get me. I'll put it in the chat now, my email address. I'm happy to help you through it.
It's on the website?
Yes.
Community Impact Grant. I didn't see it easily there. Now it may be somewhere. I would suggest that you put it on that page just so people that don't know that Judy Alperin's the one to contact at the Federation, that it be.
Karen, it's also in the guidelines. It's definitely in the guidelines. So in the middle of the application, it says guidelines. There's a link directly there, but we will add that. Thank you for letting us know.
The application, it's there, you said?
In the guidelines. If you look halfway down the page, I believe it is, there's a thing that says it's a link to the guidelines and it spells everything.
The link. Oh, okay. Yep, I see the link. Right. Great. Great. Thank you.
Well,
Anybody
thank
have
you,
any other-
everybody. Thank you, Dina. Thank you, David. Great explanation, really good insight and I think you really help people if they haven't written grants, like somebody like me. You made it seem really easy. So thank you.
Pleasure, and good luck to everyone. We want to see you succeed in this.
Thank you for spending time.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank
All
you.
right. Good night,
Thank you so
everybody.
much. Have a great night, everyone.
Robin, you want to hit the stop record button?
Okay.
Upper